Namaste and welcome. I'm Pratim Bose and you are watching my podcast, Perspective. As you are aware, Bangladesh is commemorating 1 year of July uprising. It began on July 1st and will end on August 8th. In between, they declared three national days. I'm taking this opportunity to discuss the key takeaways for India during this 1 year. You can say it's 1 year of the Yunus administration, but I would prefer to say it's 1 year post Hasina. First and foremost, this 1 year have divided Bangladesh into, or let's put it this way, that those who claimed the ownership of July uprising ended up dividing Bangladesh in Awami League and anti-Awami League. They, as you are aware, they branded Awami League equivalent to Nazi party. Equivalence to Nazi party is, of course, very dangerous because they are labeling it to a party which was at the forefront of the liberation war. And if on the other side, it is the Islamists are definitely they are the biggest beneficiaries. If we look at this 1 year, the Islamists are the biggest beneficiaries of the changeover or regime change. And they have also been Islamists and led by Jamaati Islami, which opposed liberation and unleashed atrocities on pro-liberation people during the liberation war, killing and raping thousands. This is part of the recorded history. So they are a leading force in this anti-Awami League camp, not in terms of vote, but in terms of influence on the Yunus administration. So their leaders who were sentenced for the death sentence, they are acquitted. They are walking out from jail and etc. etc. These all are known, so I just gave you a recap. So what it essentially did, Bangladesh was divided on this liberation issue, but over 54 years, we thought that this dividing line became a little hazy. That works well for a country like India because it has to work with many options. Because power may come, there may be changeovers, but over the last 15 years, so one question that we kept asking is whether why not Indian Foreign Office is too professional, too mature. They are dealing with so many people. They have just established diplomatic connection with North Korea. They are working with Taliban in Afghanistan. They are working, you name it, and they work with them. So theoretically there hasn't been much problem in Bangladesh. But why this problem? Now, as it came out, it was the dividing line of liberation has now turned into a much stronger Awami League and anti-Awami League divide, wherein they inadvertently, I believe that they didn't intend it, but they ended up doing that. They have put all who are not in sync with Awami League. In sync means Awami League is, after all, it's a political party. The liberation and secularism are two strongest ideological pillars of the party, fair enough. But in the end, it is another party. And when a party comes in the government, it is a worldwide experience. When a party is in the government, it has less to show ideology and more on the governance issues. So suppose the people who fell out with Awami League during the 15 years of time and for valid reasons, now they have no, and assuming that, obviously they are pro-liberation. So these people have nowhere to go because on the other side, you are seeing the Islamists who killed pro-liberation people in 1971 are calling the shots. And unfortunately enough, in Bangladesh, BNP failed to own liberation and secularism as much as Awami League. So that part was a little hazy. And this time, as it happened, because the Islamists became extra ambitious, so the students who claimed the ownership of July and trying to replace the liberation history by July, if not in words, then if definitely by their action. A memorial in Dhaka that was built in memory of the liberation, which has a long history. It was a 20 years of fight. Uh, it was demolished to make way for a July memorial. Similarly, as we know, back in February, they demolished. In fact, that was a double demolition because the first, it happened on August 5, but in February 5, 6 months after the uprising, they suddenly woke up and went and demolished the uh, Mujibur Rahman Museum, the national hero. He was the liberation hero, and he belonged to Army League, of course. So, and Hasina's father. So he died. He was assassinated with most of the family except Hasina and her sister on 15th August 1975. So there is no explicit reason to go after a man after 50 years, but they are doing so. They are trying to denounce Mujib and etc. So by doing that, they have actually isolated the entire or put the entire pro-liberation uh, people on one side, and they have nowhere to go but supporting Army League. Now that's a very good proposition for League, which had a lot of explaining to do for the firing, for the deaths. So many deaths, hundreds of deaths in July. The misgovernance, corruption issues, or whatever. I mean, these are natural. You have been in 15 years, so such things will crop up in stew, and then July had happened. So they had a lot to explain, but unfortunately, because of this very sharp divide that these people have created, uh, that is why Army League is gaining support in Bangladesh. I have just been there and have seen it. It is a very, you can say it's a dormant, but it will. So that way it works well for them. I don't know whether it works well for Bangladesh, because it is not a good thing that is to happen. They are gaining negative votes. And on top of that, this government failed to function. 1 year has been miserable for Bangladesh. And I'm not going back into it because a lot has been spoken about it already. Having said that, I believe one of the major takeaways of this 11 months for India is bursting of the myth that Hasina sold out Bangladesh's interest to India. Now, we are not bothered about Hasina once again, but we are bothered about this tag that India is looting them. And it is unfortunate but true, but Bangladesh is irrespective of their social status. They prefer to believe, most of them, or they prefer to believe that India, they always got bad deals from India. So this myth has finally suffered a major setback post-July. Let me say how this happened. As you may remember, just before July, Hasina signed a rail transit agreement with India. It would have offered Eastern India connectivity to Northeastern India through Bangladesh. Now, this was part of a larger plan for a regional, sub-regional connectivity, by which Bangladesh, and a lot of work and investment has already been done in that area, to offer Bangladesh connectivity to Nepal and Bhutan by rail or multimodal, where rail is not possible. So this way, this rail transit became another big anti-India, anti-Hasina issue in June, and finally in August, after the uprising, Hasina had gone. And this government just started from where that rhetoric had left. They picked it up from there, and it had been very high on anti-India rhetoric. When I say government, I'm of course meaning that not merely what the government says, but also because this government doesn't have an identifiable political banner, but it is politics in their own, by their own admission. It is a political government. So where they ended up is that I'm just looking at the forces which are closer to the government, the people who are holding positions in government commissions or committees, and even the ministers, even the chief advisor of the prime minister, de facto prime minister, Dr. Muhammad Yunus. So all put together, this is an anti-India. They have been beating the anti-India campaign over the last 11 months. But it fell flat on its face since, I think, March, April. First, India withdrew from the transit project, rail transit project, and all sorts of connectivity projects. Almost all connectivity projects it was pursuing. Some of them were half done. India simply withdrew. So it has no further plans to pursue this, at least for now. It has suspended the regional connectivity plans. So with that, Bangladesh's the future plan for Bangladesh to give connectivity to Nepal or Bhutan has gone to some extent. Rail connectivity part is gone. Then the other side, other stories began in May when India unilaterally cancelled a facility that it had offered to Bangladesh in 2020 to use Indian airports for export of garments, which is 85% of their export kitty to other destinations. This is called transshipment. This is withdrawn. Now, while India has withdrawn the facility for, or the proposal for transit between different parts of India through Bangladesh, Bangladesh is still enjoying transit to Nepal and Bhutan by road. It is on. So it is enjoying one-sided benefit. Therefore, India is not transferring goods through Bangladesh to Northeast. So it is a case of asymmetric benefit. And as we know that right now, over the last 2 months, India had put non-tariff measures like port restrictions on most of the Bangladeshi imports, the key imports, particularly garments and jute. Now, these two were critical contributors behind the rise of Bangladeshi exports to India from somewhere around 200 to 300 million back in 2009 when Hasina came to $2 billion when Hasina exited. The primary reason was India compromised its own domestic interests to create space for Bangladesh. In 2012, India unilaterally reduced the tariffs for LDCs. You cannot do it for a country. So, you just say that it is for LDCs, but Bangladesh was the major beneficiary for many reasons than one, which I'm not explaining here anymore. But Bangladesh did not give reciprocal benefits to India, which they were supposed to give under the South Asian Free Trade Treaty. They were supposed to bring down the tariff barriers, but they didn't. There were also cases of many kind of shadow tariffs. This is a well-researched subject by World Bank. Now, all put together, so therefore, Bangladesh was enjoying asymmetric benefits. It did not gain much media attention simply because India did not push it, or India failed to make people aware of it. I think both are correct, given India's weakness in public diplomacy. Because not many, even many Indians didn't know that the Bangladesh enjoyed a transshipment facility. and which was very, which was gaining popularity, which was becoming very profitable for them. So right now, where it stands, India has taken a series of steps. Clearly, this is just the beginning, assuming that the regime in Bangladesh will continue their way, because they have left very little space for maneuvering space for themselves. But that had actually, it is when India had put port restrictions on textiles and jute, it is actually a correction, because textiles and jute are two major employment channels. So when India created space, Bangladesh, it was impossible for Bangladesh to gain space in India through regular competition, because India has an integrated textile sector, whereas Bangladesh is merely into garments, which means stitching. They are basically into cheap t-shirts. So it wouldn't have been very possible for them. It wouldn't have been comfortable for them. And for long, they struggled to increase their exports. But what essentially happened was India created space. India sacrificed its own domestic interests, namely employment opportunities, etc., to create space for Bangladesh. And Bangladeshi exports grew by nearly 10 times, 9 or 10 times in 15 years. And India became, back in 2009, India was the 15th largest export destination of Bangladesh, which is negligible. When Hasina was exiting, India was 7th largest export destination of Bangladesh. So that tells you a story. And China is much behind. But meanwhile, China became the top exporter to Bangladesh, replacing India. So if anyone is comparing in Bangladesh, is comparing the relative benefits of trade with India and China, the vote has to go to India, because it was a much more where they got better access, and not because they are a very competitive economy. Doing $2 billion of trade in a textile producing country with is too much for them when you don't have other products. That, interestingly, one of the issues where Yunus had backtracked was on electricity tariff, and this is about the Adani plant. But before that, let me give you a comprehensive picture. India supplies roughly 2,700 megawatt of electricity to Bangladesh. Of this, 1,250 megawatt is through a government window, which again is divided into two. 250 megawatt is through a complete government-to-government deal for giving electricity at cost plus regulated price, which is applicable to Indian consumers to Bangladesh. And 1,000 megawatt they are eligible to get from the Indian open market. Now, India is world's cheapest electricity producer. India has created huge capacities over the last 15 years. The deficit is down from 12% to 1%. So all this put together, India is, you get cheap power in India, and they are accessing this 1,000 megawatt from the market. Another 16 megawatt installed capacity dedicated facility was tied up with Adani. This was a private deal, and when the agreement was signed, there was a bar on exporting electricity from dedicated facilities using domestic coal. So this company is using imported fuel, and they had to draw a dedicated transmission line to Bangladesh, so it involved a lot of costs. These two cost components are structural in this tariff build-up. It became a major issue in Bangladesh back in 2022 to 23, 24 in the in the last years of Hasina. And the general tone was that India has been looting, Adani has been looting Bangladesh. Yunus government came and started on the same note. They unofficially, through the back channel, they requested India to intervene. India said it's a private deal. I cannot do, you settle it out. And they had the option of going to international court seeking a review. They did nothing. In fact, last month, they settled all the old dues. The question is why? Simple. If you look at real-time basis in Bangladesh, Adani is cheaper power when compared to their own generation. Now, their generation involves a majority of it is fuel-based, liquid fuel, and gas. Both are costlier, has to be a couple of times costlier than coal. And the coal facilities they have are on imported coal. So it is on 8,000 megawatt. Now that they don't have the muscle for trade muscle or the logistics in Bangladesh to handle that. Naturally, the costs go up. So Bangladesh ended up realizing that Adani power is cheaper to them. And there is data to prove that it was. But the question is how Bangladesh is going to go forward next. And that will be very crucial because they are not stepping down on anti-India rhetorics. Bangladesh has invited Chinese in at least 2 different locations which are sensitive to Indian security. They invited Chinese companies to operate. One of them was given just floated or during Eunice era. The other one was there, and India had a counter bid that India was ready to do that job. So Bangla, and a lot has been spoken, a lot of bad mouthing has been done, a lot of threats has been issued on our northeast, and a lot of other things which are not very palatable to India. And the BNP, which is likely to come to power if there is an election, is not clean either because its leaders were found when going hyper on the anti-India rhetoric. So all this put together, Bangladesh has put itself in a tight spot. It had the option of working with India after Hasina, and India waited for that till March, but it didn't work. It went otherwise because simply because it has very little political space to maneuver. Because you cannot blame Hasina for compromising Bangladesh's interest to India and at the same time deal with India. That was the basic structural issue, structural constraint that they suffered from. Now, all these are going to have a bearing on the Ganga water sharing renewal next year, 2026. Professor Brahmachalini, who is a famous is famous in strategic studies, internationally famous. So Professor Brahmachalini said that in Asia, it is only India which signed water sharing pacts. One with Pakistan and one with Bangladesh. The Pakistan one we know, the Indus Valley from which India has just suspended. Bangladesh water sharing pact, interestingly, less spoken about, but is also seriously asymmetric. There are 2 reasons behind it. Number one, India is many times bigger economy than Bangladesh. The river travels for longer stretch in India, but India shares 50% of Ganga water to Bangladesh. But that's not big. The most dangerous clause in this treaty is India is duty bound to contract bound to supply 34,000 cusecs in dry season, which means India is standing guarantee for climate change, which means India is standing guarantee for diversion of water in the upstreams of the tributaries by China and other countries. For example, Nepal. Koshi originates from Tibet, flows through Nepal before joining Ganga in Bihar. India is standing guarantee that that even if they divert water, India will supply the water. So the issue was brought up in a blog post by former Deputy NSA and former High Commissioner to Bangladesh, Sri Pankaj Saran. in January this year, where he said that he indicated that because the issue, unfortunately, once again, Bangladesh raised it about they are always clamoring that India doesn't give them water and all these things. So then Pankaj Saran wrote that fantastic, we will review the way, but in that case, Bangladesh also has to share the deficit. So where we are headed to, I understand that it is going to be very critical. Now, in this case, and one myth, as I started saying that there was a myth that India is looting Bangladesh. India has looted Bangladesh. Hasina sold Bangladesh to India. Now, these 11 months saw the biggest setback to this propaganda. The other day, a television anchor asked the press secretary of Dr. Yunus to go public with the asymmetric agreements which Hasina signed with India. I mean, agreements which benefited India out of the way. And he simply sidestepped the question. But it is a big takeaway for us. So where Bangladesh is going? Well, for now, it is going to be very difficult for Bangladesh, most probably, because they haven't amended and they have left very little space to amend their actions politically. The BNP government is coming, and BNP government has left very little space to amend those things. And it is to be seen if they can do it. They are expecting election in February, assuming that it happens. So we have to see what it does. But it has to take a turnaround. If Bangladesh will continue to enjoy the asymmetric benefits only if the next government takes a complete turnaround from the so-called agendas or political rhetorics of the July protesters. The two cannot go hand in hand. So we have to see where it goes, but I'm very happy that the myth has been busted. Thank you for watching Perspective. If you like this episode, please subscribe and share. फिर मिलेंगे.